Your car just broke down and you need $1,000 to fix it right now. Do you have it? Chances are you don't. 49% of Canadians say they're ill-prepared for an emergency. I get it, it's hard enough paying your regular expenses, let alone actually saving some of that money. Today, I'm going to give you all the things that you need to know about saving for emergencies, the types of emergency funds, how to figure out how much you actually need, what you should consider saving for, and some tips for realistically saving that money. Welcome to the Ready Set Life YouTube channel. My name is Brittany and I'm a millennial financial coach who makes videos all about taking the fear out of finance. Make sure to hit that like button if you enjoy this video and subscribe with that notification bell turned on if you haven't already. I put out new videos every other Thursday and you don't want to miss them. Before we get started, I just want to put a quick little note up top. Today I've made some additional material for this video. Down in the description, you'll find a link to a worksheet that's going to walk you through this entire process. Feel free to download it before we start so you can actually follow along, or wait until the end and I'll remind you to go grab it later. Emergency funds are confusing. If you look anything about them up on the internet, you'll get a million different results, all telling you a million different things. Some people say you need $1,000. Some people say you need 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. Some say however much it'll take you to replace your income if you lose your job, and some even tell you to just go with the flow and keep whatever you feel comfortable with. I say it's a bit of a mix. I'm more inclined to treat it like a job loss fund, but that's because I think that you should be smart about your other savings and already have prepared for the emergencies you can be reasonably sure that will happen. This is where rainy day funds come in. It's a bit confusing because a lot of people think emergency funds and rainy day funds are the same thing. I even got super confused about it when I was making this video. Here's my definition and hopefully this will help you out. A true emergency is something that you can't predict or plan. You can't predict that your company will go under and have to downsize and your boss will lay you off. You can't prepare for a flood disaster that forces you to redo your entire basement. Your emergency fund is going to be a larger, more general sum of money that's for saving for that type of expense. Your rainy day funds are going to be for those emergencies that you can actually predict. For example, if you own a car, it's gonna break at some point. You can't predict the timing of that expense, but you can predict that it will happen. Similarly, if you own a home, something will eventually go wrong with it. Even if it's a new build and you don't think that things will need to be replaced anytime soon, eventually something will break. That being said, there isn't really a standard when it comes to how much of these savings to keep on hand. Everyone's life is completely different, and therefore the emergencies of what everybody is going to want to prepare for are also different. So if they're all completely different, how do you figure out for yourself how much you're going to actually need? First, we're going to separate your savings into two different categories: job loss and rainy day. Job loss is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to want to have enough money in your accounts to get you through a job search period. If you get laid off or fired, you're going to want to be able to search in peace knowing that you have enough money to get you through. Calculating this depends totally on your industry. So think about how long it took you to get your current job. Was it super easy and it took you like a month? Or was it more difficult and maybe you were waiting 3 to 5 months for that perfect position in your field? How often do positions in your field open up? Do a quick job search right now just to see how many you think that you could apply for. This will give you a good idea of how long you think it will actually take to get a new position. Of course, you could always get a quick minimum wage gig if you're really in trouble, but the point of this is to actually give you a safety net so you feel comfortable enough to dedicate your full time to actually getting a job that will cover your current lifestyle, so that job loss doesn't completely turn your world upside down. The next part of this is to figure out our rainy day funds, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated. Your lifestyle and specifications are going to be different than the next person, and your comfortability, or what I'll call risk tolerance, is going to be different as well. If you go through all these calculations of what you should have, but something just feels off and you don't really feel right about it, that's an important thing to acknowledge. Money isn't just logic, and there's a behavioral and mental aspect to it too, so we need to keep that in mind. To give you a baseline, let's figure out what we want to save for first. I suggest doing a big brainstorm. Think about all the things that could possibly go wrong, break, or otherwise mess up your financial plan. Do you own a house or a car? How old are they? When were the last major repairs or replacements? What big ticket items do you own? How much would it be to replace your cell phone? Or maybe you've got a really souped up desktop that you need for work. How much would it be to replace that? Think about all those things in your life that you use on a day-to-day basis that would turn your life upside down if you didn't have them. Again, I'm going to plug that worksheet down below that I made because that has a big list of stuff to think about that might jog your memory on something. The next thing we want to do is take that list and try and calculate what a reasonable amount would be for each of those expenses. I'm going to leave some articles down below for houses and cars specifically because I think those will be pretty popular, but just Googling blank average repair cost or blank yearly maintenance should give you a good start. For housing costs, there's a general rule that something like 1% of its purchase price or $1 per square foot would be a good ballpark to aim for. But think about things like how old the house is or how old the appliances are. 1% might be the average, but if you bought a fixer-upper with a 20-year-old washer and dryer, that might look pretty different than saving for a brand new build. Generally, a good average for a car is around $1,200 to $2,000. But again, you need to factor in some previous repairs and the age of the car or how much you drive it. Once you've got some reasonable numbers, we're going to have to figure out how realistic they're actually going to be for your life. Remember when I talked about the behavior and mental aspect of money? This is where that comes in. Take a look at the numbers that you came up with. How does it feel? Are there too many different saving buckets and it seems a little overwhelming to you? Do you feel like it's overkill and you really don't need to be saving that much? Do you feel a lot more comfortable now that things are visually in front of you and prepared for? Ask yourself why to figure out what's going on behind the scenes. If there's something that's bothering you about it, you probably won't follow through with actually saving in these funds. So get to the bottom of those feelings and either tweak something to make it easier on your brain or decide to stay with the system that you came up with, but keep those feelings in mind when you start having those doubting thoughts later on in the process. Me, for example, I like to be super organized and prepared. I have about 7 different rainy day accounts that I'm contributing to every month. Having that many accounts organized in that way makes me feel confident and comfortable that I've covered most of the possible expenses that could possibly come up. My partner, on the other hand, thinks I'm a bit nuts. He thinks separating out multiple accounts is super weird. If you've gone through this process and you find you're more on that side of things, that it makes you a little overwhelmed to look at that many different savings funds, or it just doesn't give you that comfortable feeling that you should be having, don't do it. Find a different way to make it work for you. Maybe instead of saving for it all separately, you use those numbers that you come up with to come up with a magical, comfortable number that you can keep on hand in one account that you feel totally confident with because you know you've calculated it personally for your lifestyle. Or maybe you feel like it's all a little too much or too little to keep on hand, so adjust it as you see fit. There is no instruction manual for this and no right way to do it. This process should give you at least a good idea of the things that you should think about or an outline of how to structure your emergency funding. But you don't have to follow it exactly. As long as you're comfortable with what you've come up with, you can personalize it as much as you want. Once you've sort of sat with it a while and determined your comfortability with everything, then it's time to put it into practice. Now, I bet this is the section that you've been waiting for. It's one thing to calculate this big, huge number that contains all the things that you could possibly be prepared for, but it's another thing to actually have that money sitting in your accounts. If you're like me, those numbers that you came up with can seem a bit impossible at first. It might even be more than you've ever saved in your entire life, and that can be pretty daunting. Do yourself a favor and break it down. Figure out what it takes every month to fund each of those accounts in the next year. Once you've got that figured out, you can start trying to build that into your existing money plan and just see how it works. If you don't have a money plan, I'll link my how to make a budget video up in the cards so you can go over and make one after this video. You should have one. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. The whole point of these funds is that they're predictable but untimed. So if you're 3 months into your 12-month plan when your car breaks down and you've only funded a quarter of your account, that's going to suck. But having those 3 months of savings is going to be way better than having nothing at all. We can't expect these funds to be linear. So when we're calculating our monthly amounts, we're just compromising between what we can actually afford to put in the account and kind of guesstimating the scheduling by saying, I want X amount within the next year, even though we have no guarantee that will actually be the right timeline. It's going to take a lot of playing around. If you can't fund them all at their top amount right away, figure out what priority each of these funds have in your life. You can try funding the 1 or 2 top accounts first, or putting the majority of your money towards your top priority, and then funding the rest of your accounts in smaller amounts divided between them. Or again, if you're that type of person that just wants to fund one thing, figure out what section of your savings you're going to dedicate to these emergency situations, and throw that bulk amount at one big fund. Hopefully that gives you a much better idea of what you should actually be saving for and how to calculate the amounts. Again, I've made a worksheet to go along with today's video, so make sure that you take a look in the description and visit my website where you can download it. This should help you out a ton when you're trying to calculate all of this for yourself. Please give this video a like if you liked it, and make sure you let me know in the comments down below if you have any additional questions about emergency funds. I'd love to hear if you're saving for anything unique or what your top priority is with regards to your rainy day funds. Remember to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you haven't already, and until next time, I'm wishing you great financial health. Bye! Quick little note on top. Sounds stupid. Do you feel like it's overkill and you really don't need to be saving that much amount? That much amount doesn't make sense in the process that will actually work. Oh my god. I've filmed so long, making mistakes. Description bar? That's not a thing.